Have you ever been at a place where you've been experiencing a moment where you know you're called to one thing, but then you're like, how do I do that one thing and this thing and the God thing? If you've ever been in a place like that, you want to make sure that you are stayed tuned to this webisode of I Am and More presents The Journey to More. You all know who I am. I am attorney Jamila Moore, where I help you start and protect your businesses, your brand, and your profits through trademarks, contracts, and copyrights, and different types of business strategy programs. But today I am super excited because I have with me someone that I am pulling in to mentor me. Dr. Marlon Haywood. Now, I would try and introduce him, but I wouldn't do him justice. So I'm going to pass it over to you for you to introduce yourself.
Well, thank you. I truly appreciate it. My name is Dr. Marlon Haywood, CEO founder for Urban Male Network. So we are a male mentorship program, leadership development organization for young men in the Chicagoland area. So currently, right now, we service 250 plus young men that we provide service to on the South Side, West Side, and in the South suburban area. So just excited about how God has expanded the work that we are doing and in the community. So I'll just stop there. As we talk, I'm sure I'll probably talk about more of just the great work that we are doing as an organization.
Yes, yes. So one of the things that you mentioned is you're the CEO and founder.
Mhm.
That within itself, like how did this idea come about and how have you remained steadfast to the vision? Because I'm sure it wasn't easy.
No, it wasn't easy. So interesting enough, right? I started doing the work that I'm doing now as a volunteer. So like when I was in college, I was a part of an organization called Black Male Initiative. The whole focus and goal of that organization was to make sure that black men graduate from college. So keep them in school, but then also from there help them to graduate. So as I was a part of this organization, Black Men Initiative, I want to say like my sophomore, maybe my junior year in college, I would go to the local elementary, high school volunteering with the Center for Black Studies in college and through this organization, Black Male Initiative, mentoring at the local high school and elementary school. And every week I was faithful, like in going. And then to the place that when I was in grad school, I had actually it was a group of young men. We There was like a male summit, a youth summit actually, that was taking place for like the local kids. And I remember, and it was black kids. I'm like, I didn't know we had this many black kids in DeKalb because that's where I went to school in DeKalb, Illinois, at Northern Illinois University. And so I saw these black kids, and then I remember asking like, "What are you all doing your spare time when you're not in school?" They said like, "We don't really do anything. We just be bored." And I said, "Well, if I started a group, if I had, got food for you all once a week, we kind of gather to have conversation, and then when we do basketball, flag football, or just a fun activity afterwards, would you come meet with me?" And they were like, "Sure, we'll do it." And again, I didn't know anything about starting a nonprofit. I didn't know anything about the whole 501c3. What does that look like? I just had a heart to serve within the community and make a difference. And so, and one of the things is that again, out of my own money, out of my own pocket, once a week, I was paying for food. They was coming, like 15 to 20 boys, right, from the local DeKalb high school, and they was consistent in coming. And I was consistent in meeting with them. And then pay for the food. We'll have conversations, and then afterwards we'll do basketball. We'll do dodgeball. So we would always do some fun activity, afterwards of doing that. Then before I knew it, it was just like, wow, I was consistent. So when I graduated from grad school, I remember saying to myself, I'm not coming back to Chicago. I said I applied for jobs in New York. I applied for jobs in California, Florida. I said I'm going everywhere or anywhere but Chicago. And I never forget that we had an event, and I had actually started doing like putting my job application in. I had job interviews lined up, and this lady said to me at the event, and I never forget it. She said that you believe in God, but you know that I'm not God, but you know that people like me exist. And so then she said, "Shall I continue?" And I said, "Sure, go right ahead." And so she said that I see you being surrounded by a lot of young people, a lot of young men. But I see them in shirts and ties, like like you're very influential. I don't know why. I see you being surrounded by a lot of people. Like, are you on some sports team? Are you like do a coaching or something? Like, what is it that you do? And then she said that, but she said that you have a lot of job interviews lined up. And then she said to me, "Is that, but you're not going to get one job interview. You're not going to get one job offer from those job interviews." At that time, I had 12 interviews lined up across the country, right? So I knew that in my mind, I'm going to get one of those jobs for sure, right? And she said, "You're not going to get one." And I'm like, this woman is crazy. And she said, "But there's going to come a job after that that you're going to know that that's the place and the job for you. And then they're going to know that you are the person for the job." And then she said, "Do you trust me?" And I said, "No." And I got up and walked away. Uh, and what's funny is that after that, all of the job interviews that I had lined up, one by one, I started getting, "Sorry, we can't extend an offer." I didn't get it, to the point I didn't get not one offer from any of the 12 jobs that I had lined up. So in this place, I was feeling discouraged. I'm like, and I remember my grandmother, who was alive at the time, has always been a spiritual person in my life. And she said, "You know what, grandson, that just means that what God has for you is bigger, is better. That's not it. So he's working something out that you may can't see. So begin to thank him for what's to come and for what he allowed to pass you by." So in that moment, you don't want to hear that. You're like, "But I wanted one of these jobs," because I felt in my spirit, in my mind, that was what was for me. And Jamila, if I'm talking too much, let me know. I can.
Listen, I think the people are enjoying the story. I'm enjoying the story.
Okay. All right.
I'm gonna pull
Okay.
out the story. Keep going, because
Uh,
grandma is blessing us.
Grandma blessed me in her 90 years for sure. So in that moment, I never forget, I was very discouraged. I remember crying. But then after I had this conversation with my grandmother, I wiped the tears from my face and I began to say, "Lord, I thank you for what's to come." Right. Because I
Mm,
remember her saying, you know, thank God for what he allowed to pass you by, but then also what is to come your way. So in this moment, I'm thanking God for what's to come, what hasn't come yet. And I started applying. I just started applying for so many jobs that I literally forgot what jobs I applied for. And then I forgot how many jobs I applied because I just was applying. I get a call and an email for a job interview for Malcolm X College for a transition specialist. I did not remember applying because I remember I told you I just was applying to jobs. I didn't
right.
know what I applied for. And so they said, "Hey, is Marlon Haywood available?" I said, "Yeah, this is me." They said, "Yeah, you applied for the transition specialist position. Well, we want to interview you." Now imagine this is back in Chicago now. And I said, "Okay, cool. Yeah." I didn't know. I had to research what is a transition specialist because I had no idea. I didn't even know what I applied for. And I'm like, I gotta figure this out because I got an interview lined up and I don't even know what I applied for.
Right, right,
That
right.
happens sometimes, right? And so I go to this interview and sitting around the table, it's a lot of older individuals that I felt intimidated by because I'm fresh out of college. People always tell me in my entire life that I look young. Now imagine I'm fresh out of grad school at that time. And I really had the baby face going on. Like I ain't had no facial hair whatsoever. But I remember that day, I think I had a bow tie on or whatever. And and they was asking me questions left and right, like, and not one person smiled like at all. And I was like, I am not getting this job. Right. But it was at the end of the interview. But I was answering the questions. I mean, every time they asked me a question, I was hitting it right back off. Like, but there was one question I remembered that I never forget. If I don't remember no other question, I remember this question. And the lady asked me, who was the dean of that department for adult education at the
Mm,
time. She asked me, she said, why should we hire you and over anybody else that we're looking at? What makes you different?
Mhm.
Now, my answer at that time could have came off as either arrogant or like we don't need him. But what I said to them, because by this time I knew that I was supposed to be coming back to Chicago. I had no choice now. and I and I said to them, I said, now whether you hire me or not, I know that God has called me to come back to Chicago.
Mm.
The young men in this city need me and they need to see someone like me. So if I'm not doing this work with Malcolm X through the adult education department, I will still be doing this work, but it would just be with someone else because I know that I am called to help my city and the young men that are here with the
Dr.
vision.
Haywood. Dr. Haywood. Okay, now you told me to interrupt. Now I gotta interrupt you, right?
Okay.
Because how we go from I am not coming back to Chicago, and it's funny because I have a similar story. Like
Mhm.
after college, I was not going back to LA. I didn't go back to LA, right? And then
Mhm.
I moved back home, and I'm like, no. And God's like, now I'm sitting in Chicago. Like, who wants to live in the coldest city in America? That's just my
It's not the coldest, but I get it.
I know that was my story I was telling myself, right? When they talk about the windy city. Yeah. And I know my story a little bit of like how I came to like get to this place of purpose. But you went from like running from Chicago to a few months or a few weeks later being like, no, this is my place of destiny. What changed?
Well, what changed is that I was looking, and I never forget, I was watching the news, and my heart and my mind and my spirit felt troubled
Mm,
about issues that was taking place in our city. And I was just like, something has to change. And but I remember asking myself, what difference that I'm going to make as one person. I never forgot that, but I get to that part of the story so I can explain. But my heart felt troubled, and I felt that I needed to come back to help make a difference. And and I never forget that there was a man who had told me years ago. I was probably like 12, 13 at the time, and he said to me, he said, "You're going to go to college. You're going to get these degrees. God has blessed you to do the work and to be educated. But it's not for you, but it's for you to come back and give back to the very community that you have come from. So remember where you have come from because he wants you to come back and give back to that same community and to help them so they can see somebody like you and you could pull up people as well to do the same thing." And I thought back to my remembrance of when the guy said that to me years ago. And so I just knew then. I knew when all of the jobs denied me, and then after I had the conversation with my grandmother, I had no doubt in my mind that I needed to come back. It's kind of like Jonah, right? If you was to think about Jonah and Nineveh, right? God had instructed him and had instructions and work for him to do, but he was running from his assignment. Now, as he was running from his assignment, that's why the boat that he was on was troubled. And as they was trying to figure out every which way to make it work, throwing things over, Jonah knew. He said the only way that this storm is going to stop and it's not going to disturb you all is if you throw me over. Well, they tried everything that they could to not make that happen. But for sometimes we got to think about it in our lives, and this is commercial break, that we are trying to carry people who are causing trouble in our lives to carry things. And God is saying you need to just throw those things over. That's just a commercial break. So let me get back to it. But the point is that for me, it's like thinking about with Jonah, right? So which is he was trying to run, but as he was running, he couldn't run from his destiny. And even he thought, okay, if I just get thrown over, but even then, God still provided protection in the belly of a whale and then put him back on land. So in thinking back into my story, it's like as much as I tried to divert and go and do other things, God still made it where I had to come back to the work, to do the work that he wanted me to do within the community. And I knew by that time, like it's meant for me to come because it had been trouble in my spirit and my heart. And so when I now have this interview and I made that comment, I think after I did the interview, I did a second round. and then I did a third round. So after I did 3 rounds of an interview back in Malcolm X. After I did the interview, I think 2 to 3 months had went by. I had not heard anything, and I'm like, what's going on? What's going on? Now fast forward, I end up getting a job. Now I asked the dean. Now what I didn't know is that the dean of that department had lost her son due to gun violence.
Mm.
So when it came to really tackling this particular issue, it was very like close to her heart
Mm-hmm.
because of how she lost her son due to gun violence. So when I spoke about coming back to the city to make a difference, I knew nothing about how she lost her son to gun violence. So that was number one. Two, I had asked her, I said, why did it take you 2 to 3 months to give me a call back? Because I thought I didn't get the job. She said, well, Marlon, we had already decided on the two people that we had wanted. You were the last person that we interviewed. She said, but by the time you finished talk, because we had said when you sat down, oh, we're going to get this young boy in and up out of here. This is going to be quick. This ain't going to be long. She said, but by the time you was finished talking, and it brought me back to the same my remembrance when a lady said, you're going to know that they need you there. And then you also going to know in your spirit that that's the place for you. When she said that by the time you was finished, we knew that we had to figure out how to find money to bring you here to Malcolm X College. She said, we already had decided on the two. So we had to create a third position just for you. So here it is that a third position was created just for me. So she said that's why it took 2 to 3 months, is because we were creating a position and trying to find money for the position that was created for you. So isn't that so? Sometimes when we think things are delayed and we wonder, like, God, why do you have us in waiting? He's putting things in position that is going to benefit you in the long run. So I didn't know. In my defense, I'm thinking like they didn't moved on, they don't want me. I didn't know that really that they was working things out directly in my favor. So I get to Malcolm X College now. I'm in this role. Now, as I am there, I'm working in the adult education department. I'm on the west side at the West Side Learning Center off Madison and Kildare, off from the Viaduct. If you know anything about the West Side in this neighborhood, I'm like, Lord, why do you have me here? I'm not a West Side. I'm a South Side. And I mean, it definitely was a different part of town. I ain't knocking the West Siders, but where I was like, Lord, what do you have me at right now? But as I was there, I noticed that the young men did not complete their GED at the same rate as the young ladies. So I had asked, could I start a male mentorship group? Like, could I? Because I'm like, I was used to doing this in college, right? I was used to volunteering. So I'm like, can I do the same thing that I was doing in college here? So the dean said, cool, you can start it. So I started the group. And I think I started with like 5 to 7 guys. And I remember asking myself, and this is what this came in at, and I never forget this. I said, God, what difference am I making just working with 5 to 7 guys? I felt my work was pointless because with everything taking place in the city, I'm only working with a small amount of guys. And God spoke to my spirit so loud and clear. It said, if you be faithful over a few things, I will make you ruler over many. And so for me, I was faithful working with those small group of guys to the point like I was spending money out of my pocket again, taking them on trips, paying money for food. And then before I knew it, I was asked to expand the program to the main campus of Malcolm X. Then after that, it ended up becoming a class that I was teaching, the Urban Male College Success course. So it went from me just having a group working with GED guys to then I was working with guys working on their 2-year degree at Malcolm X College. Then I had the Urban Male College Success course. So then I went from there to the point that as those guys was graduating and transitioning to work or to 4-year college, they still wanted to be involved. So I said, I don't want Malcolm X to feel like they have like ownership of it. So then that's when I turned it into a nonprofit from Urban Male Initiative and made it Urban Male Network when I made it a 501c3. So then I started taking those very guys that I was started with at Malcolm X to the local elementary school, to the local high school to provide mentorship. So that's how we ended up expanding into the high schools and then into the elementary schools. And then before we knew it, now we service close to what 13 plus locations. And as I stated, we service 250 plus young men. We hire 30 youth throughout the year, 15 in South Shore, 15 in the Grand Crossing community. We just expanded programs in the South Suburban area that we have a community space that we offer after school programs. But it was all because I was faithful over my assignment and I was consistent to where I didn't think that I was making an impact, but God knew and He saw my heart and He saw my consistency. And from there, it has expanded to be in the place that it is right now today.
Listen, and don't you say a thing. Don't you say a thing when I say this thing. When I tell you, don't you say it. I feel like this is a clarion call for some folks listening to this around the expansion that is about to take place in their lives because they have been faithful over a few things.
Mhm.
And one of the things that you have really outlined for every listener here is that no matter the space you were in, there was a nudging that you leaned into and you decided that you were going to meet the need, even if it meant coming out of your own pocket, your own time, without being noticed. And so when we talk through this concept of being pushed into greater, I've added on God's plan. It's about really being quiet enough to then allow your spirit to really inform what you should be doing. And this reminds me a lot of like my law school process, and me feeling some sort of way like not going straight to law school from undergrad and then going to law school part time and being an educator during the day. And I remember a pivotal moment where I had asked, my mom was in New York with me, and I was like, let's go. I'm on the wait list at Columbia. Let's go pray around the school. And I remember she prayed, God, let your will be done. And I was angry. I was so her. I
Yeah.
was so angry with her. I was like, why would you pray that? Like, I need to be off the wait list. That's the prayer, right? And shortly thereafter, I didn't get off the wait list. And so I was like, well, what am I going to do? Am I going to go to UCLA? So I was like, I'm not leaving New York. And ended up staying in education and then going to law school part time. Fast forward, that because I was an assistant principal, that situated me to learn more about teaching and learning and training, not
Mhm.
only children, but adults. And so now there's this thing where all of this is married together because I was pushed into greater. And what is the piece around, or what are your thoughts around people possibly not having to be pushed because they actually sit earlier on to get information from God on His plan?
Hmm. Well, you know what? I've been a person. Sometimes I've had to work on this where I be very impatient,
Mm-hmm.
and there's been some times that I've learned that if I just waited on God, the journey would not have been as difficult as it was for me, right? Because ultimately, His plan is what is best for us, but we don't see it that way always. So, for example, even going all the way back to me for eighth grade, you probably like eighth grade that don't make any sense, but true. I tell this story every time. There was a high school that I really wanted to go to in Chicago, and actually, I got denied to every high school. God always does this to me. Why you gotta deny me for every high school? So, but I got denied from every high school that I had applied to. I didn't get into one high school, and I remember crying for weeks. Like, God, I don't understand. I really wanted to do this. Like, what happened? And the reason why I got denied from the high schools is because in Chicago it's kind of different. You have what's called a selective enrollment test. You got to do this test or whatever. Well, I didn't take the test serious because I didn't think because I had good grades, so I thought I was fine. But what I did is when it came to taking that enrollment test, I just put anything down and I went to sleep. So when they looked at the test to see if I was qualified to get into these schools, well, they went off my test results, and my test results was not so great. And before I knew it, I got denial after denial. And I'm like, what? So I ended up going to a local neighborhood high school. It was like lean on me. It was fights all the time. It was like we had to go through metal detectors. I mean, it was a lot. And I'm like, God, why do you have me here
Mm.
my first year? I didn't understand it. Well, what I did is that I end up actually, so the school that all my friends end up going to, I didn't go there. So then I'm going to this neighborhood school, but because I was at this neighborhood high school and I knew that I wanted to change and I knew that I wanted something different, I end up working as hard as I could. That I end up ranking like 26 out of 635 freshmen. Like I was in the 20s out of six. Like I was like I think I had all A's and one B. So I was killing the game. I was doing great, and so I ended up working to transfer to another school. Well, it was a school that I wanted to go to. Every time we would call, they kept saying they had a long wait list. They're not taking anybody. But I felt in my spirit, in my heart, like this is where I'm supposed to be. I did what I was supposed to do. I did the work. So I'm like, God, I know that this is what I like. When I went to visit, I'm like, this is a place that I should be at. So then, to make a long story short, I end up telling so we call every time we would call, they would say, we're not taking anybody. We know the wait list is long. I don't know what to tell you. So one day I just felt it in my spirit. I said, Dad, something is telling me we should go up there today. He was like, but you've been calling. They saying they're not taking them. I'm like, but I can't explain it. Now, mind you, I'm 14, 15 years old. I'm telling my adult dad that something in me is telling me we need to go up there and take my transcript today. So we go up there, take my transcript. The guy who's the admissions counselor was like, well, I take a look at it, but we really not taking anybody. We're full. So he says, but I still take a look at your transcript. Now, my grandmother, who's always been instrumental, right, in my life, I leave the transcript. I'm like, they're not going to do anything but just throw it in the garbage. As we halfway home, they called my grandmother's house because that was who the contact was for me. And she says, the school that you just went to just called and said, can you turn back around? Hopefully you're not too far. Well, we was halfway home. So my dad and I turned back around to go back up to the school. Now, as we up there, the guy says, I looked at your transcript and I was like, man, you literally had one B out of all your classes that you had all A's and one B the entire school year. He said, man, you did amazing work. Like your attendance, everything. I could tell that you are a hardworking student. You're the type of students that we need in this school. He said, well, you know what? He said, it's something about you. I don't know what it is. But he said, today is my last day. I am about to retire. So what would it hurt for me to put one plus person? And he said to me, welcome to Chas. That's the name of the school that I went to. And he said, you will not see me again because I'm about to leave. And he said, they can't do nothing to me anyway because I'm leaving. He said, I'll see you later. And that is how I end up getting into the high school that I graduated from. I didn't know that this man's last day, but I knew God kept telling me there was something in me. Go up there today. Go up there. Now, what if I would not have acted on what he put down inside of me? And I always say, oh, I'll do that tomorrow, or I'll do that later. But timing is everything. And God is a God of timing and systems in order. And if you're doing what you're supposed to do, I've witnessed that he does his part in fulfilling the rest. So for me, yes, I ended up having to go to a high school that I didn't want to go to, right? I didn't understand it. But my friends that did go to the high school that I wanted to go to, they ended up, their grades was bad. Attendance was not what was supposed to be. They played around. And I know if me at 14, 15, I would have been doing what my friends did. But God knew that he had a different plan for my life. He couldn't afford for me to play around to mess up my journey and where he was trying to take me. So he had to take me a different route. Now, in that moment I cried, it didn't feel good. And sometimes that's why we have to understand the prayer of God, your will be done, but not mine. Because we never understand what God is trying to take us and the path and the journey. And it ended up working out for my good, even when I didn't see it. Okay, I feel like I've been talking again a lot. So okay, I'm gonna
No,
pause.
no, 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 no. The keys around timing, and everything, and And so I've had this personal issue. It's a conflict, right? Because we hear people say God is a gentleman. And I'm like, maybe that's true for some people, but there are some of us where he cannot allow us to veer from the path because the impact is so great. And I feel like you are an example of that. And there are many other examples that are listening to this. And it's like, yes, he's gentle, but yes, sometimes he will stir some stuff up just to make sure you are at the right place at the right time for the right opportunity for the next level of impact. And so I feel like that's what you outlined there. And when we are walking through this journey of more, because we're always going to be growing, like this space is for entrepreneurial minds and for people to be solutions oriented. You've saw this need, and I would argue that you were placed in that school so that you could see your future and how you needed to solve for your future
Hmm.
that first ninth grade year, right? And so you got inundated in the problem so that later you can come back with a vision and solution for that problem. So you're going through this, you get your master's, now you're at Malcolm X. How do you even get the strength to go do a PhD? You done got 2 degrees. Why?
um, Interesting enough, God has always been intentional, right? There, going back to Malcolm X again, right? My very first day, I get there early. Now, when I get there early, I get lost, right? Because I don't know where I'm supposed to go. Nobody is there to help me. I asked the security guards. They said, well, the people ain't nobody here. You early. Like I was really extra early, but there was two black men that were there early. They was like, well, they should know maybe where you're supposed to go. So I get there as my first day. I talked to these two black men. That one was like an executive director of a department. Another one was like I think a dean of a department or something like that. And they was like, "Oh, this is your first day," and I'm like, "Yeah." So they said, "Well, you can come sit in our office and talk to us." So I talked to them, and as I'm talking to them on my first day before I get started, they was like, "Man, we really like you." The one guy says, "I'm going to steal you away from that department." That's my goal. And he laughed about it, and I'm thinking, "Oh, he's just joking." What's funny is, so he took me to my department for adult ed. Well, a year after, I actually ended up working for his department. I ended up work like the very guy that I met, getting there early, being lost. He ended up actually becoming my supervisor a year later because I didn't know that when they hired me, like I said, that they had to find the money. So I was on a grant contract that was only for 1 year. They never told me that. So the money had ran out. So they wanted to keep me, but they didn't have the money in that department to keep me. So he offered and said, "Hey, I have the funding in my department that I can bring Marlon on to work under me." And then he told me, "I would be okay with you doing the work that you're doing with young men under my department." So he allowed me actually to create a space to do the work of mentorship. So every time, one of the things that I noticed and how God has been intentional, every job that I had, I did some type of work mentoring of young men. They allowed the space and created a space for me to do that because it just showed that it was always in me. So here it is that I get to working for this guy. His name is Dr. Dotson. And he sees the work that I'm doing in the community. He sees the work that I'm doing with mentorship. And then he says to me, he says, you're doing great work in the community. But if you really want to make an impact where people respect you, you got to get those 3 letters behind your name. And I said, well, like, what? I mean, I'm doing great work. I don't really need it. He was like, no, you want to be respected in academia. You don't want anybody saying you don't have this, you don't have that. So, yes, but then now you have the credentials and the credibility by having it. So I said, okay. So he said, I have a friend. And this just shows you how God will place people in your life to help you along your way, right? So, and if it probably wasn't for him, I don't think that I would have my doctoral degree. But he said, I have a friend who is the dean of a college at Roosevelt University. They're starting a education leadership program. I think that you would be great. I think you should apply. I will write you a letter of recommendation, and then he said from that, there is a job that I want you to apply for. So it was twofold actually. So he recommended me to go for the doctoral program. He wrote my letter of recommendation. He made the connection to a friend of his that was over the education leadership program at Roosevelt. So I actually ended up getting in, got into that program. Then there was a new position. It was a fellowship at Rush University Medical Center, to be a health disparities research fellow for like 3 or 4 years or something like that. Well, through this fellowship, they paid your full-time salary doing research on community. They wanted you to have at least a PhD or extensive research background. I had none of that actually. So he asked me, was I interested in this? And I said, well, sure, but I don't have the experience. He said, well, I didn't ask you all that. I just asked, were you
Mm.
interested? So he said, well, what I'm gonna do with you is that every day, or we said every week. So for the next so many weeks, so we had an interview set date, and then what he did with me is that he worked with me. He gave me books on like health disparities, on like interviews, like whatever the job position. He worked to like prepare me for the interview. So we would come in. He would give me these articles to read, and then he would say, "Okay, well, I'm gonna test you on this. I'm gonna ask you questions on this particular thing." So if we did this for probably about maybe 3 to 4 weeks, right, a couple of days during my lunchtime, that he was preparing me for the interview. So then when it came time for the interview, I made it past the first round. I made it past the second round. I get to the final round, and they said, "Well, Marlon, you have done great with the interview, but the final decision is not up to us." I said, "Well, who is the final decision up to?" Dr. Dotson. Dr. Dotson was the man who was my supervisor, who was preparing me and had me meeting with him every so many days throughout the week. And he said, so it showed me, right, that a lot of times is that God would already know the end, but he's taking us through a period of preparation. And he wants to see that are we a willing vessel to go through the journey and the preparation? Because then if you're willing and you're open to, he said, look, I've already know what it's going to be. I just need you to go through the process of what I prepared for you. So when I went back to him, I was like, you knew the whole time that you made the final decision, but you never revealed that to me. But he had me go through all of these trainings and meeting with him and interviewing and preparing. Like I was preparing for real. But it at the end of the day, I was like, oh wow. And so when I got this fellowship, not only did I get paid for it, but because the Rush had a program that they paid for up to 75% of your tuition going to college, like for going for a post-secondary degree. So I was getting paid, and I was able to get my degree paid towards as well as I was completing this program. So like God worked it out to where He positioned me in a space that I was able to do the work that I was doing, get in a doctoral program, and get it paid for through this fellowship. With every like, it was not in my plan to do none of this, but He positioned me around people, or put people around me that put me in this place to go and get my degree, get a fellowship, and then now get in a position to do the work that I was doing now.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. One of the things that I think through is whenever we go after our plan, we will end up at a place of discouragement and disappointment because we have misplaced expectations. But if we're willing to sit and go after God's plan, we're talking about something totally different, because He positions us with the right timing and the right relationships to blow our mind and put us in places and spaces that we couldn't even imagine. And so you move from you were pushed to greater to now pushing your boys to greater. Talk about some of that work and how people can support the work that you're doing.
Sure. So if people want to donate, you can go to urbanmailnetwork.org. There is a donate button. Or, you can reach out to us via Instagram, Urban Mail Network, or Facebook, which is Urban Mail Network Chicago. It can be donations. You can reach out to see about volunteering. We always looking for volunteers, right, in different ways, whether that's speaking to the young men about the career fields or professions that you do, or if it's looking to hire some young men, right, or if because I have young men always looking for work. Um, so it's multiple ways that people can get involved. Whether it can be time, donation of time, it can be donation of money, or it could be donation of a space. Maybe you have a space that you want to offer to do an event, to do a program. I think people should never look at it like I have nothing to offer. We all have something to offer, and we just never know how that can help the next person or the next generation.
Wow, that's amazing. I know that everyone has been truly touched by just portions of your story of how you were pushed into greater and really moving in God's plan. I know that's a thing for me. For my entrepreneurial folks that are looking to start their businesses or grow their businesses, you want to make sure you connect with me at iamandmore.com and I am and more on all social media handles. And for those of y'all that didn't start your business right, yep, website's not protected, no trademarks, contracts from LegalZoom and stuff. Oops. Head over to iamandmore.com. Dr. Haywood, thank you so much. And I'm pretty sure we'll be seeing the harvest of the seeds you've sown here for years to come. Take care, everyone.
Bye bye. See you all later.